Welcome to the Tag Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Andy Ryland. Coach Ryland, how are you doing today?
Awesome, Andrew. Really appreciate you having me on. Appreciate the opportunity to maybe speak to a new audience and share some of the stuff we've been doing. So it'll be good.
Awesome, man. I'm super excited and thank you for making the time to be here. Just to get us started here, why don't you just tell us where you're currently living and what you currently do?
Yeah, so I'm the senior manager of education and training at USA Football. So sports national governing body here for amateur and youth. We're based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. So live here in the Midwest. Grew up out on the East Coast, but moved out here for work. Been here 9 years now. I've always been in the education department at USA Football. As we've grown and priorities have changed and different things have happened, we've obviously attacked some new projects, but always been on that coach development side and really enjoy kind of coaching the coaches and maybe planting some seeds and opening some eyes and trying to help better the coaches. Because as we both know, coaches drive the experience of the athletes. And so that feels good for the ego, I guess, maybe when you say like, hey, I can have a really big impact, because if we can educate some coaches and they go work with their teams, now you go from a coach who's working with 100 players to, thousands and tens of thousands of athletes. And that feels pretty cool.
Yeah, you're casting a pretty wide net there, right? And I'm assuming with your position in the education sector, you've probably played a decently large role in the heads up football movement on your side.
Yeah, so that was actually one of the first projects when I came into USA Football. At that time, we're really going through the concussion narratives in football and contact sports. And so that was one of my first major projects, and we're really lucky that went well. At least down here, that sparked a huge uptick in the youth coach certification.
Mm-hmm.
So USA Football does not have mandate authority, which is slightly different than maybe some other NGBs and other sports organizations. But it was just right timing and a good program. And so that education was really health and safety based around concussion awareness. And years adding on, we did heat hydration, exertional heat stroke. We did sudden cardiac arrest and AED awareness, equipment fitting. So just, what are the things you would want any adult, any coach to be knowledgeable in if they're overseeing youngsters on a football field? As we've gone forward, we've done some technical stuff, mostly in and around the contact area, because again, that has a big health and safety aspect to teaching the contact side of it right. We've done some work in the high school, same thing around education on health and safety protocols, the technical side of safety and contact skills, and then kind of in the free time and the passion projects, really looking at skill development, how coaches bring skills out of players. I think I tell people on my social media, I'm maybe more of a skills coach than a football coach at this point, where it's a lot less tactics and schemes and a lot more communication styles, training styles, teaching styles, and then the nuts and bolts of contact skills is probably where I spend most of my time. You're not going to want me to teach you how to throw a football, but I feel like I'm pretty good in the tackle area.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what originally drew me to you, was your approach and taking that holistic and that communication style approach to everything, and the work that you're doing with contact. That was what originally kind of put you on the scene for me a few years back. So with that being said, obviously I know a bit about your story. I've been reading some of the stuff you've been putting out for a couple of years. I've listened to you on a few other podcasts, but why don't you just let everyone know a little bit about your story? So let's go back and start with your background as an athlete. You can go all the way back to high school and then walk us through your entire career as an athlete, which I think will be a cool story for anyone that's going to listen to this one.
Yeah, so grew up in that older generation, right? Multi-sport youth childhood. You just played everything. Whatever season it was, you played. Summers were, going to camps and soccer camp and basketball camp and football camps and just doing everything. I was probably ahead of the specialization wave, and that was really cool. I did get a little seduced by it, I'll say. So I stopped playing baseball in like the third grade, kind of really early, because I had made an all-star soccer team. And when you're in third grade and somebody tells you you're going to get to go to another state and stay in a hotel and play in these big tournaments with hundreds of teams, that's the coolest thing in the world. So I actually was a huge soccer player as a youth and loved basketball. In high school, I'm still a multi-sport athlete, played football, obviously, played basketball, and continued to play soccer. So our varsity soccer in the schools is in the fall, but club and all-star soccer is in the spring. So I played school football, school basketball, and then played club soccer in the spring through high school. I just really enjoyed the game. Was lucky enough to have an opportunity in college. So I played football at Penn State University, played linebacker there. No lies, won't tell anybody any stories. Career backup, just, kind of an average guy, good enough to be on the team, good enough to hang around, never could really earn a starting position. I have 8 career starts at linebacker. All of them were due to injury. So the typical, guy sprains his ankle, you fill in, you start 3 games in a row. He gets healthy, you go back to playing special teams and spot duty. Somebody else, I don't know, pulled a hamstring, you get 2 games. So, played in every game, lettered for 3 years, but, wasn't never good enough to really kind of crack that starting lineup. Didn't really have a chance at the NFL because, again, I couldn't get on the field full time as a collegiate athlete, but my father had been a rugby coach. So I grew up with the game of rugby, before I could walk on the sideline at games, mom carrying you in the backpack and the whole deal. So had a desire to play rugby. So I did play rugby at university my final year. Was lucky enough to earn All-American, which is our all universities team. Spent 3 years with the U.S. national team, actually earned caps in both 15s and in 7s. So, kind of playing 2 contact tackle sports, which would turn out to be a huge blessing for me going on later, because as rugby tackle started to become popular in football, it was like conveniently I had some pretty good experience in those. And I tell people the playing side of it, not about personal achievement, but I was blessed to be around some really great coaches and coaches from multiple sports with multiple philosophies and different game types. And you start to pick things and kind of morph and mold your own philosophy and how you would like to do things. And that's really influenced me going forward and how I view sport and view coaching. But after the 2007 World Cup, which I did not make, by the way, I made the 50-man trial squad, went to camp, didn't make the final 31. At that time, there was no professional league here in the States. So, your main goal is looking at the next World Cup. I thought I'm probably not going to make it to 2011. My body logged quite a few miles as a dual sport athlete by that point. And so I retired from international rugby and club rugby kind of at the exact same time and said, time to start the career.
That's awesome, man. And what a cool experience for you. Just like I'd say there's a lot of similarities between football and rugby, but obviously there's a ton of differences too. I think, football is a little more popular. The culture in football is a little different from rugby. Like I never had any opportunities. Rugby wasn't big. We didn't have it at my high school. I wasn't really around it much until I got to university. I got to know some of the guys, but just culturally between the football world and the rugby world, it's like vastly different. So for you, I can almost see that in your approach and the way you write and the way you talk about things. I could see that it's someone who's spent time outside of the football world. And I think that's such a blessing for everyone that you get to share with, because, the football world's great. It's awesome, but we're not perfect. There's a lot of flaws in there. And I think there's a lot of ego too, which holds people back from looking to other areas. And I think that's one thing that you do a really good job of, in saying, hey, this is what maybe some of the things that I've learned or teaching styles that I experienced in rugby. And now you're trying to bring that into the football world, which I think is really cool.
Well, one, I appreciate you saying that, but yeah, it really has. And the biggest difference is, I classify rugby as a free flow sport, or, similar to hockey or basketball or lacrosse, where the action doesn't stop and the ball is going back and forth and flowing up and down the field. You're the decision-making and the reading of the game is much different, where football in its militaristic, nature of the huddle and we stop and we get organized and we get aligned, has a different feel to it. Now, within the 5 or 6 seconds on a football field, you still have to make an incredible number of decisions and choices in and around. And I think what rugby did for me was highlight the need for the athlete to be able to see, read, and adjust based on the free flow. And then what I've hopefully tried to do is think about how can we apply that to football and the decisions that have to be made within that 6 seconds of chaos, if you will, that is a football play. So just because we get to get organized and the coach tells us what to do doesn't mean I don't have to be very adaptable and make really high quality decisions based on what I see. And so that's maybe the line I try to tread, or hopefully seed I can plant for coaches to consider a little more deeply, that maybe they just haven't before, because most of our tradition and history is in that very rigid martial nature that is football.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just innately built into the game, right? Like you said, the way it's structured, we huddle almost after every play. The coach calls every single play. We break down film like in that same manner. So it is a very X and O's based sport where there's a ton of control and it kind of works top down, where, like you said, in rugby, and again, like I said, I've never played, so just observationally, like you say, it just seems like a lot more of the onus is put on the players. And once that game starts, the coaches, it seems, like I said, I don't have a ton of experience, but it seems like the coaches don't have a ton of control once the game starts. It's really on the players.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they have, they get messages to the players, with walkie-talkies and radios. But if you look at a full-fledged international match, coaches are actually up in the stands or in the box. Like if you watch a professional game, they're not even on the sideline with the players. So the communication is much different. And it's a little thought experiment. I always like to talk to football coaches on, what would happen if you had to be in the box or in the stands for the game? You weren't on the sideline. How would that change how you prepared your athletes on a weekly basis to make decisions, to assess what the opponent's doing and that? And, I'm all for player ownership, but also, just even with that guidance, you have to prepare differently. So not everything transfers, but we can still learn a lot. And then, like I said, within 6 seconds, there's, if you look at a defensive back or who's got to read, run, pass, and then find the receivers, and then decipher what routes are coming and who's their man, and then, drive on the route. And there's a lot of decisions and a lot of processing that has to happen. And that's where I think, look, whether it's soccer or hockey or whatever the free flow sport is, mine just happened to be rugby, coaches can learn a lot from and how they prepare their athletes to do.
That's awesome, man. I love that. So obviously a really cool, background for you, like multi-sport, dual collegiate athlete, able to go on and play at the national level in rugby. How was that transition from being an athlete into coaching? And did you go straight from rugby back into the football world, or was there some steps in between?
No, so again, this is completely dumb luck, but so unlike most strength and conditioning coaches, when you're on podcasts and I listen to a ton, you kind of get a lot of the story. The former athlete, they're doing their thing, and like a strength and conditioning coach plants a seed that, hey, you might be like really good at this, and they pursue that as a career. Well, so I went to college thinking I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach. So my studies were in the Department of Kinesiology. Movement science was my major. I was going to be an S&C coach. Towards the end of my football career, my football coaches started planting the seed that, hey, you survived and you succeeded kind of with the mental side of the game. Coaching might be a good opportunity for you. So I wanted to be an S&C coach and actually ended up being a sport coach, which is maybe the opposite of most people. But when I got out of rugby, I was taking my GREs and studying for those, getting ready to go to graduate school. And my high school co-captain for my high school football team was the running backs coach at a FCS, formerly 1AA level school, so a smaller D1 program. And I got a call and, hey, I heard you're back in the States. I heard you're looking to get into coaching now, kind of start your career. Well, they had some staff movement and they had 2 open spots. And there was a spot open on the defensive side of the ball for outside linebackers. And so without doing an internship or a GA, I kind of lucked out and walked into being a position coach. I think this was like 6 or 9 months after I retired from rugby. I'm right back in the football realm, coaching a position, have my own room, my own guy, the whole deal. So it was kind of dumb luck, but I got into sport coaching. I spent 3.5 years in the collegiate system, and then loved the coaching, loved being with the guys, loved being out on the field, but realized in the collegiate system, I didn't love recruiting. I didn't love the off season and all that kind of stuff. Like I just wanted to coach. I just wanted to be out in the field and do that. As a former athlete, that was really where my heart was at. And an opportunity came up for USA football, which was this coach education position. And again, dumb luck. I had experience at the international level. I had experience with national governing bodies working with USA Rugby. I understood kind of international terminology, which was unique to football because of our varsity and school-based model to understand, hey, U16s and U18s, as opposed to, hey, you're a junior or a senior and you're going to go to the draft or you're going to go to college. And so I understood kind of that international model, and I had a good enough background in football that I understood the tactical side. So it just became a good fit for someone to work in a national governing body in a very varsity based sport because I had those experiences. And so got the gig here and really just been able to pursue my passion ever since, which is kind of work on this coach development side and some of the things that I had seen and thought, hey, I bet you we could do differently. And I wanted to do differently. And now hopefully I can help coaches maybe adopt some of those methodologies.
That's awesome. So walk us through what does what does your position look like? Like you said, you're director of education. Am I saying that right?
Senior manager.
Senior manager. Okay, I was close. All right. So senior manager of education, what does that look like? Are you traveling across the country? Are you doing lectures? Is it mostly in producing content? Walk me through what your job actually looks like and kind of how you go about your business.
Yeah, so you kind of hit the nail on the head. Those are the two main things. So we have online education services. We have an online certification as well as, a boatload of kind of coaching resources for everything from the first time volunteer parent working with a youth program to, a high level high school coach that they can consume online. And just with today's day and age and the size of the country, that's obviously needed. I mean, you guys probably face the same thing up there. And then I'm probably I don't know, sounds egotistical, our lead clinician, just because I'm here and I'm the guy who wrote most of the stuff, but travel quite a bit, do a lot of speaking, a lot of presentations on the materials that we produce. So, something will come in, whether it's from, the society, what's talking about or happening in the game right now, or something we've identified as an area that we think football coaches could use some upskilling on. A product comes in, an idea comes in, we'll create an educational package around it. We'll produce content, we'll produce presentations and an educational curriculum, whether that's video shoots and posting online or delivering in-person clinic, those decisions sometimes get made above me, but we have a delivering mechanism, and then we try to get it out to the coaches. So like I said, it started in Heads Up Football, and I've done things like, again, I'm not a doctor, so partnering and working with excellent doctors, which have been great professional development. For instance, when we did our heat and hydration program and exertional heat stroke treatment, we partnered with Dr. Douglas Kaza, who's at the Corey Stringer Institute at University of Connecticut. And so, we got all this awesome information, got to work really close, develop this educational package on, as a football coach who's not a doctor, who's not a certified physio or certified ATC, what do you need to know about the treatment and prevention of this illness? And then we'll present that out to the coaches so that youth and high school programs can strengthen their protocols and their action plans around that. obviously I've worked quite a bit with the tackling. So we did a project with the Seattle Seahawks back in, I believe it was 2015, which was our intro level tackling program. Got to work for the past almost 4 years now with a gentleman named Richie Gray, out of Scotland, absolute mind-boggling genius in the contact area for our advanced tackle programs. And I tend to present that quite a bit. That's a pretty popular kind of educational area for us. And then just recently, we launched our LTAD program, which is the football development model, kind of American football's version of a basic LTAD plan. And one of the areas that I identified was what we called prep for contact, which is preparing youngsters both psychologically and physically for the demands of the game, kind of in an age appropriate manner and with a nice progression that makes sense. And that took off, honestly, more than I ever could have imagined. So I've given that presentation to a lot of actually collegiate strength and conditioning programs who look at like, hey, this could be a unique add-in to our off season to get us ready for preseason camp. And so it's a cool program because I can talk with, 6-year-old flag football coaches on the benefits of tumbling and crawling to develop body awareness and coordination and spatial awareness to prepare them for the next year when they may move into a contact area of the game and they have some basic physical competencies to allow them to learn to block and tackle. Or how would we do this to prepare the physical load of a high level athlete for the demands of a training camp?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so much good stuff there. And obviously, given the circumstance of the world right now, I think this prep for contact program that you guys have been working on is going to be vitally important to make sure that as people reintegrate back into contact sports, we can do it in a safe and effective manner. But another cool thing that I thought about that you said was psychologically preparing the kids for contact. And I don't think that's probably anything I've ever heard anyone talk about before, is that preparing the kids on that level, not just a physical and what are the skills, but also mentally going into that. So I thought that's actually really cool.
Yeah. So, we talk about kind of stress inoculation. I think it's, as a S&C coach, it's something we think about all the time. And when we come to our contact combative sports, you got to think about the first time entry level athlete, and contact is usually a new stimulus for them, and again, all jokes, not trying to be the grumpy old man here, but, kids don't play outside as much, they maybe not at the park playing pickup games, but rough and tumble play and roughhousing was, used to be a staple. And now with kind of the way we are from a litigious and liability standpoint and things in schools, the analogy or the story we like to tell is, if your mom or dad doesn't let you, wrestle and fight in the living room and you're not playing backyard pickup games, in school, you're staying out of each other's personal bubble, hands to yourself, all these things. Sport, and whatever sport it is maybe the first time you're allowed in someone else's personal space. And now, whether it's a box out in basketball, a puck battle in hockey, or blocking and tackling in football, we're asking you to invade that personal space. We're asking you to do it with speed, enthusiasm, aggression, and you get that friction, that body-to-body contact, that resistance. And if you've never been presented with that opportunity to experience and learn and grow from that, it doesn't matter what coaching cues you're giving a kid. Like, he's not going to be able to perform the block or the tackle very well if he's generally fearful of the space, the friction, and the battle where that's going to occur. Mm-hmm. So by trying to knock down some of those psychological walls and get kids used to, basic tumbling, where they learn how to fall on the ground and that it's not going to hurt and it's going to be okay. And they have some tools to tumble and dissipate those forces and land correctly. Some basic, grappling, where we're just getting used to those frictions and spaces and somebody leaning and pushing on you and trying to manipulate your posture. Once you get comfortable there, now you're kind of freed up to take all these coaching cues maybe and say like, okay, now I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with all these things my coaches told me. Mm-hmm. And try to give a nice progression to stress inoculate the athletes and allow them to learn those skills. And that really, for USA football, attacks, some of our retention goals, where you're going to have a bad experience in football if coaches are just like, hey, run into each other. Like, no, do it harder. Like, try more. Well, no, let's actually build them up so that they can learn the skill, so they can have some success, so they enjoy football. And now they have an opportunity to see themselves grow, have a great time, and stay in our game. But like I said, I think variations of this idea can be used in all sports, where, two players in soccer, which we may not think about as a high collision sport, when they're shielding each other from a ball, they're in those battles, they're fighting in the box for headers and loose balls and things. There's just physical contact, and being able to both physically manage that from a balance, a strength, a stability aspect, and then the psychological of not everyone's gonna love contact. I played with some guys that went to the NFL that didn't love contact. You know what I mean? Like, that was just part of the game that they had to accept, but they really liked running around and being fast and athletic. So you're just trying to make sure they have the tools to be able to engage in the game enough that they can be successful and also really enjoy it.
I love it. I love it, man. And like you said, some people naturally drawn to contact. Like, nobody had to coach me or get me comfortable with contact. I was trying to check in hockey well before I was allowed to. I can remember I got kicked out of a game because I was throwing body checks and it wasn't contact yet. I think I was like 4 or 5. So some people are like me, where it's like we're chomping at the bit to get in there and get some contact going, and other people are maybe a little more hesitant. But I think the thing that's really cool is you guys are taking that approach from like almost like an empowerment standpoint, where it's like, if you're not comfortable, instead of, putting you in a situation where your coach is just going to call you soft or tell you that, you're a baby and you got to get in there, you're actually saying, okay, like, let's address the problem. Let's get them comfortable being close. Let's get them comfortable with contact. And something that really sucked, like, I was inspired by a lot of the reading that I've done, looking at your work and how you've put together some progressions. Like, I started to really build out into my off-season program for my football athletes this year, like a progressive system that goes from crawls to grappling to tumbling and all this. And I mapped it out throughout the whole off season to get them ready for contact. And then COVID happens. And so we can't train for a while, and then now we're back training, but we got to be socially distanced. So I have all these cool grappling drills and things that I wanted to do as part of our warm up, and all this cool stuff that's just shelved until we're allowed to actually get close to one another again. But it was cool to hear you unpack that. All there.
Performance level, like at your level and at the, the collegiate and NFL level, there's still some great carryover, because if you look at, especially with our NCAA system and then the CBA in the NFL, we have huge blocks of time where by rule, you're not allowed football activities. You're only allowed strength and conditioning. Mm-hmm. If you take a high level NFL athlete and with the CBA and say you don't make the playoffs, you could conceivably not block or tackle someone for 20 or 22 weeks, before you get into a competitive game situation. And now all of a sudden you're back into training and you're going to add this load. And as we say, contact is a physiological stimulus. There's a contact load that occurs with it. So if you go from 22 weeks of contact not being allowed by rule to preseason camp contact, like, that's a huge jump. So we're not going to ever be able to mimic, the true contact that happens on the field. But if instead of going from a 0 to 100, maybe coaches can plan really well and we go from 0 to 75, and then we add some of this grappling and combative and tumbling work, and we can get the athletes up to, 25 or 30. Well, now we're jumping from 30 to 75, and we think we can manage the athletes better. So we think that can be a useful tool. Again, it's not going to replace our sprinting and our heavy lifting, but it's just another tool to work into the program to make sure that hopefully the first week of camp, the load jump isn't as massive.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's just so many benefits to that too. Like, even piggyback a few steps back there, like, yeah, the physical preparation of having that included in that 22-week block where you can't do any contact, obviously that speaks for itself. Doing some grappling, that's going to prepare you, but even mentally too, right? Like, if you went 22 weeks without, like you said, even being close to someone that first week, and now you're trying to earn a roster spot. If you're in the NFL, you're trying to make sure you can pay your bills. Like, mentally that's going to be stressful as well. And then I always bring it back to, like, think of the athletes. Always got to put the athletes first. Like, what are they going to enjoy more as like an extended warm up? Ground-based mobility, which I'm not saying is bad, it has its place, or getting mitts on somebody and wrestling around and having some fun and playing some games. Like that's going to get them way more engaged. It's probably going to serve them better long-term anyways. And it's fun for everyone. So I don't know, it speaks for itself. Why wouldn't you try and include stuff like that?
Yeah, we advise, like, in most of our stuff, most of the writings, like, it's a great late stage warm up. Like, obviously you're going to do your, your traditional warm up stuff, but kind of your late stage warm up before you head out to the meat and potatoes of practice. Let's make sure we hit on some of that stuff. And whether it's a microdosing approach to the off season, but even in season, I look at it as specific contact prep where, we all know if the first couple periods of practice or the first couple of drills are going to be highly competitive, contact periods, and coaches like to do that sometimes, hey, Tuesday, it's our heavy work day. We're going to get some good on good action. We're going to spark practice, get the energy going. So the first couple things we're going to do is, to get that enthusiasm up and some good on good work. Well, if you go from a basic dynamic warm up to, hey, run into this 300-pounder as hard as you can, like that's a pretty big jump as well. So I can crawl and tumble and grapple as my late stage warm up. Now, like my core, my neck, my traps, my shoulders, like I'm ready a bit more to take on those impacts and deliver those blows because my body's switched on and all those kind of core groups and core movements are really sparked now. And I think that using it as a contact prep, not just off season, but even in season, can help make sure that we're ready for the intensity of the drills that are to come.
I 100% agree. And I had all sorts of ideas for different suggestions that I was going to make at the university level, which was in the same vein. Like, just make it fun, but make it beneficial, make it useful. Like, you go first period, ones versus ones, full live contact. Yeah, I can remember those days when you get to be like fifth year and that's the first period in practice. You're like, oh, geez, this is going to be a tough one. Let's go.
I need a little more warm up before.
Yeah, come on, man. Let's go. Like, 10 minutes of something else before, please.
Something as simple as, you do your basic dynamic. And most dynamics, if we're honest with ourselves, are highly movement biased. And we're going to need that if we're going to sprint around the field. Mm-hmm. But my last 3 exercises of my warm up are a crawling drill to kind of get my core, shoulders, and upper back turned on, some sort of tumbling, a little spatial awareness, little micro collisions with the ground, if you will, and then some grappling to, kind of get cued up and cued into moving another human being. Well, now, like, I feel like I'm a little more ready for, like I said, hey, we're going to go 4 plays good on good to get this party started. Or, we're going to circle up at the 50-yard line and have one of those one-on-one drills and everyone's going to hoot and holler. Like, adrenaline might get you through, but as you get older, you want to make sure the body's ready too.
100%. And I mean, we've kind of subtly done it already through this conversation, but I opened it up on Instagram for some Q&As and I got a handful of questions that I came up with myself. I got a handful that were submitted, and then I've actually written down a few here. And that was one of the first questions, was really that contact prep periodization scheme and how that kind of layers into your annual plan. I'm speaking more in the S&C language now, but what, from like a bird's eye view, when you're putting together this contact prep plan, like what are you looking at and how are you progressing that as you approach the season?
Yeah. So when we at USA Football kind of launched our formal program, just to help coaches, we kind of have 4 main categories, and it's falling, tumbling, crawling, and grappling. And it's just an easy way to have coaches, like pick and choose drills from each category to make sure that they're addressing all the needs. Now, at the higher level, you may not need to do as many falling drills, but with the youth, like, honestly, getting them comfortable going to the ground and teaching them some judo falls and some basic falls and how to break a fall, without using the wrong parts of the body is incredibly useful to make sure that they can do that safely and effectively. But at the upper levels, we're looking at the crawling, the grappling, and the tumbling. So most coaches, I would assume, are really comfortable with the crawling and the benefits of, cross patterns, strength, obviously great core work, excellent shoulder stability, when you start doing those things. I like the crawls because we can really vary some knee and hip flexion angles.
Yeah.
So, whether it's a bear crawl or whether it's a crab crawl, you're getting some unique angles and then asking your core to keep your pelvis and shoulders in line. And on the football field, we're going to be in some unique positions. And we know staying square and kind of not getting turned and twisted is incredibly important for us to transfer our power. So it's just some simple kinesthetic feel type stuff of mastering those positions, of being able to feel those positions. And I think most importantly, being able to dynamically get in and out of those positions, because you're going to have to be able to do that. So a lot of bang for your buck. Excellent warm up. You can be done as a filler. So there's great ways to just touch on those all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And then do you guys have, and this might be a hard question to answer, so feel free to pass on it if it is, but do you have some sort of standard or something that you're striving to hit? Or is it mainly just coaches feel and based on postures and positions and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we actually do have a set of standards, but it is based on the coach's eye. So we have where we work on a key performance indicator system, and I do that for skills as well. I think it's the best way to approach bandwidth, really landmark positions we need to have, as well as individual, body types and things. But so, we're going to tell coaches, like, we want to look at postural control from a basic, like, can the athlete get in and out of sort of postures? Postural strength, meaning can we hold those postures versus either gravity or an external force. Head and neck positions, postures, controls, are they aware of that? Can they manipulate that? Obviously the flexibility and mobility. So, different crawls are going to target our hips and our shoulders to different positions. So do we have the appropriate ranges? Something that I think is really important, and I've stolen a ton from Vernon Griffith and on this one, but do we have control of those ranges? So as we do some of the more unique crawls, like, can we control those advanced ranges, or like, are we just throwing something out into full extension? Because we know that's key on the sporting field. So I think we have 10 KPIs there that will say, okay, when you're doing these drills, this is actual goal, because crawls can very easily be turned into punishment because they're hard work. And we're saying, hey, if you are sacrificing spatial awareness, body control, postural awareness, postural control, core strength, or control of a joint range of motion because you're in survival mode, you're actually losing the goal of the drill, which is to make sure that the athlete can do these things, because we think those are things that they're going to need on the football field. So we definitely lay out, like, here's some targeted things to look for while you're doing each of these drills. And then we do present a progression. So even with crawls, we're going to look at holding positions. Then we're going to start looking at what we would call lifts. So let's say I'm in a crab position, and then I'm going to lift a leg and lift an arm. Then I'm going to try to lift a leg and an arm, change your base of support. Then we're going to look at moves. So, we may go to a sit through or a foot to hand tap or something like that. And then we're going to start crawling, and then we may crawl with a resistance. So it could be an exercise band. It could be a weight vest. It could be, pushing against another opponent, but then we'll add that external load. So kind of a simple 4-phase progression even within that. And then, like I said, we'll get into tumbling, where we're looking a lot at spatial awareness, kinesthetic awareness, limb control, again, posture control. As I do any of these tumbles, can I get back into good postures? Because for me on the sports field, you're going to be in high hip, upright sprint mechanics. Then I'm going to have to sink down into this power position to take contact. Then I'm going to get off the block and I may be all jacked up. And then I'm going to have to refine power position to make a tackle. So we're looking at how we control those postures, and can we get in and out of good shapes when we have to do a dynamic movement. And tumbling is just a really simple way to challenge that, because you're instantly breaking down all of the good posture they had. And then when they come out of it, can they get back into good postures that we would be happy with going into contact. And that is a nice little twist to have those guys really cement those solid postures and positions. And then grappling is just, for me, it's awesome because we get the irregular forces that we have on the football field. I mean, I love my heavy strength training just like everyone else, but if I'm pushing and pulling you, we're locked up. The forces are uneven, the forces are changing. I'm pushing with, I don't know, 100 pounds of force. Then all of a sudden I decide I want to drive you and I'm going to push with 300 pounds of force. Plus I'm going to be pulling your other shoulder down and trying to twist and turn and rotate. Somebody described it on another podcast as kind of, there's this cyclical nature of every time we refit and push and pull, these forces are changing. And I just have to continue to brace and move. And I have to learn to hold my posture. And hopefully my goal is to break down your posture so that you become easier to move for me. And I can learn a lot about big general concepts in these grappling drills. And then, as we say, we're going to sharpen the sword with the sport coach when he gives us the specific techniques, but understanding space, distance, threats, opportunities, over pressures, under pressures, how to fight pressure with pressure, how to use an opponent's force against them, flow with their effort to put yourself in a better position. You can learn some of those general concepts in the off season through some of these drills. And then hopefully that new knowledge and new ability, you couple that with some good technical development and we'll become really good at those close quarter battles.
Dude, that's amazing. Like that's I'm a total nerd, but that right there, that was total mic drop quality when it comes to making the argument for why these types of things have a purpose in your training plan. Like I remember, a couple years back when I first started incorporating crawls and tumbling and all this stuff in my training, like my football guys are looking at me like, dude, what the heck are we doing? And it's like, no, listen, man, there's a purpose for this. Like nothing that we do is just thrown on paper or in the program because I'm bored or I want to see you guys do goofy stuff. No, man, everything has a purpose. And I don't know if I could articulate it quite as well as you did there, but in the future, if I ever have people with questions, I'm gonna be like, okay, go to this podcast, listen to this part. Cause that was it, man. That was you beautifully summed up exactly why it has a valuable role for contact athletes for sure, but I would argue all athletes. And you gave a nice shout out to the Explore the Corners movement with Coach Vernon Griffiths over there too. He's always putting out good stuff. And for anyone that's listening to this, like obviously you're going to go and follow Coach Andy Ryland at the end of this, but definitely follow Coach Vernon Griffiths as well. Some of the stuff that he's doing with the Explore the Corners is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet him. I was doing an event with the National Strength and Conditioning Association down here, and he was also there. And so we got to meet at their facility, and then we ended up having dinner that night. And I've been following his work for a while, so it's just really cool to meet him. Great guy. And like I said, I love what he's doing, kind of challenging the traditional thoughts on mobility, but that loaded and controlled mobility is really what contact sport athletes need. And I'm glad you said about all athletes, because if I'm doing this with the USA football hat on at the lower levels, that's general athlete development 101, right? That's the kind of development that all sports are going to need. Again, you could be playing soccer and we may be in that hip battle, where we're fighting for the ball, or I'm trying to widen your line and keep you from running the straight line down the field. So ability to manage those forces and hold postures is key to every sport. To me, it's just a matter of how prevalent is it based on what sport you play.
And I'll make a crazy leap here. I'll say that probably almost every single person should probably be able to do all this stuff, like having falling skills, crawling skills, tumbling skills, like that just serves every single person in general health, survival. So it's crazy to think that, we should probably just train people regardless of if they're athletes or not. We should all be able to do these things, but that's a rant for a different day. Well, that was amazing, man. I love that answer. Another question that we had, and this is something I know that you're pretty passionate about, but that's like drill design and progression. So I guess we'll maybe unpack this one through a few different questions, but in terms of drill design, like what do you see being like the biggest issue right now when it comes to drill design? I know we talked a bit about this off camera before we started, but if you could kind of walk us through what you see, some of the flaws that most coaches are making when it comes to drill design, and then maybe some of the suggestions that you have.
Yeah, so I could probably do 3 hours on this.
I think you probably could.
trying to dig into it. I think the biggest one is lack of progression. And again, I use this analogy on a different podcast, so I apologize, but I like it. And talking to S&C coaches, it seems to make a lot of sense, where if we had a 12-week training block and we never progressed our exercise, like you probably wouldn't have a job, right? If day one we back squatted X weight for X number of reps, and then at week 12 we did the same weight for the same number of reps and same number of sets, we wouldn't have had much progression. Yet when it comes to sporting environment, we'll do the same drill, the first week of preseason, because it's like a bread and butter basics. But then 12 weeks later, at the end of the season, we're doing the same drill. And you go, well, have the athletes not progressed? Like, is this same drill still suitable for a challenging enough stimulus? And I think that idea of a challenging enough stimulus is really important, where there seems to be the technical model idea that if we just teach everything to a super technical manner, that they're going to get better. But at some point, athletes have a conceptual idea of the technical model. At some point with your coach's eye, you're going to see that the player understands and is able to do the technical model in situation A, which is your basic level drill. Well, as soon as that happens, I believe our job should be, let's see if we can create a more challenging environment and see if the athlete can still display what we did in drill one. So my general thoughts are, we look at speed, we look at complexity, and we look at decision-making. And I'm going to start adding and layering those as soon as possible to the drill. So, if we're taking drill A and it's about, hand placement for a football player, once they understand the upper body mechanics of what we want on this strike, and they can, demonstrate it on a bag or a shield or whatever your low level drill is. Well, now I need to see if you can hit a dynamic moving target. Mm-hmm. Because that's what happens in the sport, is the target is moving. And the other guy's on scholarship too. So he's probably not giving you his chest. He's probably going to make it hard. So now I have to hit this dynamic moving target. Now I want to see if you can move and hit a dynamic moving target. So we have, multiple movements. Then I'm going to add maybe multiple opponents. So you have complexity of which guy do I have, and then I have to move to him, and then he's moving and I have to still hit the spot. Then I'm going to maybe layer a decision-making aspect to it. So I constantly want to layer complexity, speed, and decision-making, because that's what happens in the sport. The simple question, and I knew I was coming on, so I threw it out on social media yesterday.
I saw that.
Is what makes it hard on game day? To me, is the most basic but most important question. So if we look at, like, say, pass protection for an offensive lineman, we can talk about the technical model, but what makes it difficult on game day? Well, what makes it difficult on game day is the opponent is coming at me at varying speeds. If he's any good, he's trying to hide his chest from me. If he's using his hands, he's defending his chest. I don't know if he's rushing inside or outside. I don't know if he's using a speed rush or a power rush. So I have to put all those things together and then be accurate with my hands. And for me, the idea of like a stationary accuracy punch drill isn't going to carry over to having to make multiple decisions, having to position my body, having to work through space and time, and then be able to hit a target that doesn't want me to hit him and is hiding his chest and defending his chest. And if I do everything wrong and open up my chest, he's going to bull rush me and it's not going to matter anyway. So I have to start to layer in the complexity of what makes it difficult on game day. Another analogy I really like is a defensive back gets beat deep. And like our first thought is like, oh, well, we didn't turn and run, right? We got to work on us opening up our hips and turning and running, on the deep ball. Well, most oftentimes, especially at the collegiate or NFL level, an athlete's ability to turn and run is not what let him down. Like, he has that skill pretty well rock solid. I'm guessing what let him down is he had to make a read, like whether it's run or a pass. And then by the time he made that read, he had to find the number 2 receiver. Then he had to diagnose the route. Well, by the time he diagnosed the route and realized it was a deep route, he turned and ran too late.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the physical aspect of turning and running that let him down. It was that he initiated the turn too late, because the cognitive aspect of the tactical side of the game and deciding what to do, that is actually what let him down. So you can ask your questions like, are your turn and run drills incorporating some sort of eye manipulation and some sort of route diagnosis that makes him turn and run in time to actually make it effective on game day? And if it's not, because we're just doing our standard, kind of run around some cones and turn and run drills, we're maybe working on the route mechanics of change of direction, but it's like that difference between change of direction and agility, where we have to have that mental component. And if you're not putting, eye manipulation or decision making into it, it's not the context that it would be used in the game. So adding speed, complexity, and decision making to challenge, can you turn and run in time after you've taken care of jobs 1, 2, and 3, because that's how you actually do it on game day. And it's easy to attack the root mechanics of technical modeling. And going down a bit of a rabbit hole, I'm not anti-technical model. I think there's a place for that. I think, with 100 years of playing football, we have some knowledge and some film that we know there are some things that are associated with positive outcomes, some positions that we want to achieve on the field. But the technical model drill, to me, falls flat, because we have to make sure that you can execute that technical model in a complex decision-based environment, which the game will require of you. So now you start doing all those things and saying, okay, can you do 1, 2, 3? Can I put you in a bad body position, and then you get into a good body position and execute the technical skill? Can you find your landmark positions in 10,000 different scenarios? Or can you only do it when the coach says, all right, Grit, in your perfect stance, now show me the perfect punch? Because if I can only do the punch when I'm perfectly set up, it's not going to work on game day when I have to get into the stance and into the punch from Lord knows what body position. And often those positions are determined by the initial eyes and initial reactions of how the play unfolds. So I think working that progression is really important. And then if we were to look at the bandwidth, we have the technical model drill and the technical model technician coach. We have the completely open environment, kind of emergent solution person. And I think for me, again, my personal, the truth is somewhere in the middle. We know some KPIs, call them fluctuators, attractors. I want you to be able to hit these positions, but I'm also going to make as crazy an open environment as possible to see if you can hit those positions. I think that middle ground is really, really important. And traditionally in a football practice, we have our skills periods, and then we go into our groups and our team periods. And while groups and team periods obviously represent the competitive environment, I'm just a believer in, why do we wait for group and team to incorporate that into our training? If we're truly doing skill training, then it shouldn't be all technical modeling. We should start to layer and incorporate some of that into our skill side, so that the athlete is further ahead in their application to the group, and then further ahead in their application to the team, so that now those tools become easier for them to access when they need them in gameplay.
100%. I could not agree more. And like, I've seen so many coaches make different arguments. Oh, we got to be like you said, that technician coach. Oh, we got to be better at the basics than they are, and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, for sure. But we also have to be able to integrate that into gameplay. And I've always kind of likened it to, or used the analogy, because a lot of times good coaching is good analogies. Because we get so attached to what we do that we can't see it from a different angle. I've said, like, okay, well, think about from like a military standpoint, right? You have, like, they go and they shoot on the range. Once they can hit target and they can pull the trigger pretty confidently, they maybe as solo, they go and try and like clear a room in a mock drill, and they do that, and they're going up against just targets. And then all of a sudden now they've got to work in a team and they go and clear a room together. So now there's all these, there's a change of the environment. There's different factors at play. Well, now they're going to go do it against paintballs. Then they're going to go and do it against simunition, where they're getting hit with somewhat live rounds. And then they're going to have an explosion, right? There's this clear progression because, you know, we need to have like that stress inoculation comes from being in that challenging environment, taking all these different inputs, processing them, and having that lead to making a thought and then leading to an action. And all the while they're doing these progressions of the drills, I bet you they still go to the range and they still shoot every once in a while because everything has its place, right? But I think you can't live on either end of the spectrum. Like if we had military people that never went to the range after they passed it the first time, we probably wouldn't have a very good military. And if we never went into these open environments, we probably would get killed a lot. So that's kind of an analogy that I've used to kind of try and have that talk with people and be like, this is why I think we should probably do things a little different. So
I'll give you this one too, where it's, you know, there are times where the technical model for the athlete could be wrong and you may want to make some tweaks to it. Again, I'm a big bandwidth guy. So we have KPIs, we call them anchor positions, where kind of you're anchored here and then you can adjust and move off of it, fluctuators and attractors, whatever you want to call it. And there may be times you want to address those and adjust those. But if you talk to the athlete while you're watching film, if you ask them like, hey, what did you do wrong? Or what should you have done here? Most of the time they could tell you like, oh, I needed to have my elbows inside the frame of my body, or my arms were too wide, or something like that. So they understand what they were supposed to do. And once you've ingrained kind of, I know what I'm supposed to do, I can show you what it looks like, I know what I'm trying to achieve. To me, then the letdown is usually the application. Like if you know what to do and you can show me the good body positions, but you're not displaying those on the field, then it's an application error. And what makes application on game day hard is the dynamic nature, the speed, the movement, and the complexity. And so we should be adding those things into our drills so that players are getting practice applying your model in a vast array of situations. Like I said, I'll start you in a good position. I'll start you in a bad position. I'll start you with the advantage over the opponent. I'll start it with the opponent having the advantage over you and you have to recover. We're just trying to manipulate everything around. And then can you still get back to this thing? If you can get back to good in any number of situations, normally you're better applied on the field. Obviously there's the conceptual knowledge, the processing speed, the ability to recognize patterns, read and react, all that is important. But I most often fear we blame an error on a technical model instead of the dynamic application. And I think that's an area where we could stretch ourselves to grow a little bit more. I look at some of the research on optimum failure rates for learning. And if we're doing perfect practice, to put it in coach speak, we're proving what we can already do. We're not improving skills. Improvement happens at the razor's edge of what we're actually capable of. And if I'm operating on that edge, I'm going to fail sometimes. So having some messy practices where I'm failing because I'm stretching my abilities and trying to learn new skills and new applications, that's really important. And a lot of coaches don't like messy practice, or, because they want perfect practice. And I think that limits our ability to stretch ourselves, which then slows down our skill growth because we're never operating at that edge. So, hey, if we're doing a drill and instead of saying, hey, it was a great practice, man, we all 10 of those reps look perfect. Well, how do I know if I made you any better? You're obviously already comfortable there. If you have 2 mistakes in there, but maybe you're able to correct those mistakes or at least verbalize what went wrong and what you needed to do better or how you would try to fix it. Now we're starting to stretch and grow a bit. So we try to work, and I like to try to work in that area and say like, okay, hey, a great analogy for that is learning to ride a bike. I stole this from someone that, like, when we're really stretching the skills, hey boys, we're going to learn to ride the bike today. Like, and when you learn to ride a bike, you fall, you scrape your knee, you don't always get down the street, you have to stop and put your feet down. It's not always pretty, but we're learning to ride the bike. We're learning a new skill. So some days we're going to have to learn to ride the bike, and there's going to be some scraped knees in the process. But at the end of it, now all of a sudden we have bike riders, and that's what we need on game day.
That's awesome. And it's almost like you knew what was coming, because I was literally going to follow up after this, was going to follow up with, like, how often should we really be setting athletes up to fail in the drills that we're designing? And, obviously from a coaching standpoint, I would hazard to guess that setting your guys up to fail every single drill all week long is not going to lead to a confident athlete come game day. But also an athlete that goes through the week winning every single rep of every single drill probably is not as well equipped as he could be to go out on the field on Saturday or Sunday, wherever you play, because, things are gonna, when the live bullets start flying, there's always things that are going to happen you never foresaw. And I think it's our job as coaches to prepare them for that.
Yeah. So my general take on that is, this is where I think some of the research and some of the common sense and maybe applied learning has to take place, where, I generally say, like, on our work days. So whatever your schedule is, like, again, in college football, Tuesday and Wednesday are normally your work days. Thursday and Friday are pretty heavy tapers to get ready for a Saturday game. On our work days, we're going to learn to ride the bike, and we're going to have some mistakes. Now, if Thursday and Friday we want to dial it back, there's a couple reasons why that can be helpful. One, when we go to a little more technical model drill, or we slow things down a bit, you actually reduce the cognitive load, right? There's not as much decision making, and that may be useful for some recovery and to bring some of the intensity down. Also, some players really function well with that high confidence. So, like, learning to ride the bike and being a little messy and learning some new skills on a Tuesday, and then on a Thursday or Friday, kind of sharpening the sword, feeling really crisp, having a little less decision-making and mental capacity, and have the guys feeling really good about their technique. That might be a useful model for a lot of coaches, because it gives a natural progression. Just like we'd waive the loading and the speed and the time on field, we can waive the skill development aspect and waive the cognitive load for these athletes. But then different athletes are different. Some athletes struggle with messy practice, especially if they've come from a program in the past. It was a perfect practice program. Now all of a sudden they get beat, I don't know, 3 or 4 times in a drill. And now they're like, I stink. Like, I'm not ready for this level. I'm not cut out for this. Like, there's no way, these guys are smashing me. So if you don't set the right environment and don't tell them that it's okay to fail because we're trying a new thing or learning a new skill, that can hurt their self-confidence. And then, some athletes, kind of that stereotypical look in the mirror every morning, tell yourself you're the best. They might fail 6 times in a row and think, like, I still got this, dude. Like, I'm the best there is, so there is a little bit of that psychology involved in it, and how you handle those guys. But generally, I say work days can be messy. And then if you want to sharpen the sword on your low days or your taper days, like, that seems to work for most coaches. Again, broad brushstroke, generally speaking.
Yeah, big time. But sometimes you gotta paint with a broad stroke. Okay, so we've got some shorter questions, or potentially shorter questions. You never know. Best practices on teaching methods for football.
Yeah, so I sent you my responses.
Yeah.
I posted this a couple years ago, kind of tongue in cheek, but the best part about working with football players is they're a lot like human beings. And
you don't say.
and every sport I've ever worked with, and in my position, I've got to make some really good friends at other national governing bodies, but every sport tends to think that there's like some uniqueness to their sport, but humans are humans, right? So a lot of what we know about learning practices, those are the same, whether it's education or whether it's sport, whether it's, a high collision contact sport like football, or whether it's tennis where we're separated from a net by, like how people learn follows some pretty particular patterns. Now, we might address our delivery based on the cultures of the sport and cultures of the individuals, but what do we know about, like, say, block practice versus random practice? We feel pretty confident that block practice gives us a better short-term boost, meaning at the end of the session, the players are better able to display the skill. But we know random practice has better long-term outcomes, and that when we come back to the skill 2 days later, those who went through random practice tend to have better recall than those who did block practice and just got really good at it in the moment. Okay, well, that's a best practice we can use across any sport. And so I think we just got to look at, hey, we know a lot about physiology, about biomechanics, about energy systems, about educational policy, educational best practices, teacher-centered learning, learner-centered learning. You can go through any of these topics, find the best in class research, and find a way to implement it into your sport. So I think that the best thing to do for these questions is, instead of looking at the football player, look at the human, and then figure out, how do I apply this knowledge or this research into my weekly schedule based on my sport.
Perfect. Which leads us really nicely into the next question, which is based on like the current practice model, both on a weekly and daily schedule. Like, what would you change? I'd say most football teams follow a very similar weekly layout. Like, what do you see as potential problems with the way it's laid out, or what would you change?
Yeah, so the two things that I think are most, or one, obviously, kind of we talked about, drill progressions need to be advanced. I tell people, as a coach, your number one goal from a skill development standpoint, obviously we have great personal goals, should be to render your drills too easy and useless as fast as possible. Like, we don't want to stay at the technical model drill all season because it's an everyday drill or a fundamental or back to basics. We want our players to master it as soon as possible, so that we can start layering more and developing more application as soon as possible. Like, I want to do each drill for 2 minutes, and in a perfect world, my players would master it and they're ready for more stress. Like, that would be the best case thing. So I think the progression of drills, I think the use of more open environment, small-sided games, more representative tasks, more information, whatever your school of thought is, but the use of that during individual period, the use of that in skill periods is huge. We don't need to wait to group and teamwork to start layering in decision-making, eye manipulation, and reads. And it could be something as simple as, you make them look at thing one before they're able to shift their eyes to thing two and dissect the play. You can millions of ways to play with it, but let's get that into the skill portion of practice instead of waiting for team. I think some more random practice. We tend to love blocked, again, that the martial nature, the militaristic nature, but some more random practice can be useful. And then because I'm a nerd on the strength and conditioning side, it's my background, and I still have a lot of friends in that. I think looking at how you pair your tactical install or your tactical training with some of the physical stuff can be really cool. So, like, understanding that, like, third and long period and goal line period are going to have massively different physical costs from a high speed open field situation kind of training to a high force, very small space training, right? So if we're looking at our day, and this is getting into kind of the sports science and alignment of goals, if Tuesday is going to be our heavy lifting day and our heavy work day, like, is that where we want to do goal line? And on our high speed day, is that when we want to do special teams and third down install? Now, for coaches, sometimes that can be a challenge because we're used to, like, Tuesday, we always do this. We always do first down on Wednesday. We always review third down on Thursday. But if you're looking at how could you potentially create the best possible program, you may have to change your install days so that you're matching what days we're working on what with some of the physical goals like load, like volume, like high speed running, or like high force, high collision work. So for me, that started with cataloging our tackle drills on like, what are our high change of direction drills? What are our open space, high speed drills? What are our small space, high force drills? And then how could we plug those in throughout the week so that we're addressing the physical with the technical? And I think coaches could really do some really cool stuff if they sat down with their S&Cs and sports science groups and looked at like, hey, how could we look at almost a tactical periodization model that our periods or what we're doing tactically is going to coincide with the physical qualities we want from our athletes. I think that'll probably be the next really cool area that you see some people playing with.
I agree. And obviously, like you said, that's kind of very much in the strength conditioning viewpoint on how you're looking at things, matching qualities, that type of stuff. Like my ultimate dream is I want to be the head coach of a team and this S&C, and I don't want to do anything on the football side. Like I'm just organizing how everything that we do from a physiological standpoint lines up with our training, and then get a bunch of really good coordinators that can actually deal with the technical stuff. That would be my dream. Cause like, I mean, I've been the head coach for a community team up here in Canada. I was head coach for 2 years, positional coach for 3. I didn't get to focus on that stuff. I was head coach, special teams coordinator, quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. Like it was a messy few summers there, but that would be the dream, is have this beautiful weekly layout where everything matches everything. And maybe one day we'll get there, maybe not, who knows? But those are some of the suggestions that I've gonna try and make at the university team that I'm working with. Like, how do we make this just a little bit better in terms of matching what I'm doing in the gym with the boys, matching that into our weekly structure and our daily practice structure. Because obviously I believe that's most optimal.
Even if you eliminate the gym, because maybe not the sport coach doesn't have the knowledge, or they're not overly interested in that, other than that the work is getting done. You still think about, like, when you look at high speed versus high force, when you look at, hey, this small sided inside run has a lot of change of directions, but we're playing in this super narrow channel. So like it's going to be high force and high change of direction. And then this outside period is going to be high speeds and a lot of open spaces. Like that makes a lot of sense to people. And then I think once you can start thinking about how it contributes to load or what the goals of the day are, and what are the benefits, and what are, why you might not want to consolidate them or spread them out. I think that's probably the easiest thing. And I always go back to a story. So Tony Dungy was on our board at USA Football, and I got to spend quite a bit of time with him. And he told me that when he first took over as defensive coordinator, when he was with the Vikings, that he had to change his install schedule based on what days they were wearing pads. So when the coach was like, hey, we're not going to wear pads on this day, and he's like, well, in Pittsburgh, which is where he was coming from, we always did goal line on Thursday or whatever. And coach said, no, we don't wear pads on Thursday. And Tony wanted the guys in pads for goal line. So he had to move goal line install up, and then he moved third down install back, which was different than what he had done previously. So it seems like a huge, crazy mix, but it's proven and easily be done of just, we're still going to install it. We're still going to teach it. We're just changing the order of it, and we're still going to get all the quality reps. I would hope to think that's manageable.
Definitely. I don't see why it's not. And really the reason, like if you tried to boil it down to the reason why it's typically laid out that way, where goal line would be practice on Thursday or whatever, which would typically be a light day, it's because, from a coordinator standpoint, like they're just trying to go through their checking list. So we want to make sure we're starting the week, we're getting prepped for all the scenarios we're probably going to see on 1st and 10 and 2nd and long. And then as the week goes on, okay, well, we're going to see a few different looks on this down and distance. So we're going to prep for that. And then at the end of the week, it's like, all right, what did we miss? All right, we missed short yardage, we missed goal line, we missed this. So let's rep that stuff out now. And that's probably the only reason why it's typically done on that day. So like you said, just zoom out for a second, think about things from a holistic standpoint, and then think, okay, what objectively makes the most sense? Like, is it a cardinal sin to do goal line on day one? No, probably not. You'll be just as prepared. It's all good.
You'll still check the boxes. You're just
exactly
checking a different day.
Exactly. All right. So another few ones here for you before we let you go. And I don't know if you'll have an answer for this one either, but do you guys have at USA Football any comparison on testing averages between collegiate and NFL players from like a height, weight, 40, like typical combine stuff? Is there any comparative averages that you guys have?
So we don't, but I know those studies are out there
Yeah, I figured.
floating around. I think the NSCA may have a couple. There's some really cool combine stuff as well, where they look at like, correlation between the different drills. So I remember, and I can't think it off the top of my head, but like, players that did really well in, I don't know, the vertical jump also tended to do really well in, the 40, and players that did really well in the broad jump did really well in the 10-meter split. And the purpose of the study was, are some of these tests actually overlapping and testing the same qualities, because the correlations were so strong. So there's some unique stuff there, but there's tons of stuff on norms for the colleges by division and norms for the NFL. What I think is most important is when you start to look at like the norms and the combine data versus like NFL success. Now, it's not a perfect study, because I know most of the ones I've looked at use like, did they become a starter? Did they become an all-pro? How many years? So you start to look at like their achievement versus their studies. And what it comes out to is that there's no correlation between the combine tests and their level of achievement. Keir Wenham Flat, rugby strength coach on Twitter, who most of your listeners would probably know, talks about there seems to be a line that's like barrier to entry. Like if you're not this big or you're not this fast, you're going to struggle just with the pace of the game. But once you've achieved that barrier to entry, then it's like all different conglomerates of height, weight, speed, strength, skill, and tactical knowledge equals success, right? So if 10 arbitrary units equals a successful player, oftentimes those 10, you may get 5 units from speed and 2 units from tactical know-how, but another player has 2 units of speed and 5 units of tactical know-how and strength versus technique. And you can put together a successful player a lot of different ways. But at some level, there seems to be some low-lying kind of just barrier to entry basement that is important. But yeah, great players, if you don't have speed, you're going to make up for it with strength, technique, and tactical know-how. If you have great strength, and terrible speed, you're still going to have great tactical know-how, because you have to get yourself in position. And so I think it's how the individual athlete uses those skills and applies it to the general whole. Nobody wants a small, slow, weak player, like generally speaking, let's be honest. But once you've reached the threshold, it's about being really good at football.
100%. I agree with that. And okay, so two final questions here, and I think they're more on like a kind of a personal level, just because I know there's a couple athletes that I'm working with that are currently going through this transition, so I'll ask on their behalf. But what's your advice for a football athlete transitioning to the rugby world?
Yeah, so the first is, for me, what at least for me was the decision making, like having to get very comfortable in this free flow, dynamic decision making sport, where I'd always come from a situation where like you're always being told. So pattern recognition, pattern reading became unbelievably important in order to be able to see the game and read the game, and be able to work that. Obviously, there's a much bigger fitness component. You're gonna have to work on that. There's to be able to keep up with the pace of the game, especially there's been a lot of studies on rugby that, and I think even in soccer, that often really high caliber players run less than lower ability players, because their tactical ability to read the game, and they position themselves in the right spot so they don't waste energy. Players who are new to the game and struggle to read the game are going to be running around like a chicken with their head cut off sometimes, because they're not positioning themselves well. So they often need more fitness to be able to make up for their ability to do that. So first thing is get a PhD in the sport. You have to learn the skills, obviously, are huge, and then being able to pattern read and understand the flow of the game, which will actually make you in much better shape because you'll be much more efficient and won't be wasting as much space. But you are going to have to change some of your fitness levels. You don't get a break every 6 seconds. You're gonna have to do some of that stuff. So yeah, working with high quality skill coaches, and then the small sided game stuff, being involved and being able to read it is just going to be the biggest thing, because for everything the game has, the physical toughness, the tackle, the combat, the combatives, the games couldn't be more different from that tactical standpoint of understanding the flow, and just basic things like, well, you can keep the ball for as long as you want, so why would you kick it away? Well, there's some definitive reasons why we would kick the ball away: to avoid pressure, to play field position. If those don't make sense, none of the game will make sense. So get a PhD in the sport first and try to learn that aspect, because that'll help the physical and help the conditioning and help everything else.
Beautiful. All right, last one, and this is from me, and I just want to hear your thoughts on it. So obviously you talked about earlier on that you originally wanted to be an S&C coach. I would make a leap and hazard to guess that your brain kind of works from an S&C perspective in some contexts. How has that influenced your approach to sport coaching?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me is it gave me a lens to question tradition. And so like when people say like, oh, this, I really like this drill because it develops like explosive contact, you know what I mean? And it's like, everything I know about explosive power means it has to be above 95% intensity, and it has to be at full rest, and that's how we raise the ceiling. This drill doesn't seem to fit any of those criteria. This drill may be working power endurance, but it's not actually explosive power. And so if I didn't have some of the biomechanics or the physiology stuff, I don't know if I'd have the lens to evaluate some of that stuff. And then when high quality coaches, and this is something I struggled with early, and I think everyone does, is when you start to disagree with your mentors, right? Like that's, for young coaches, that's a huge thing when you start to find new ways, or like, I was always told this, and outside of my parents, like these were the most important figures in my life. But now like I keep learning that everything is saying this might not be true. And so that can be difficult for people. And if you don't have a rock solid lens or a rock solid criteria that you can evaluate, you may be stuck in the trap where you always believe like, well, this is good for technique. If I hadn't started reading skill acquisition, I may have stayed a technician coach, because perfect technique and working within millimeters and centimeters was the key to success, not applying it in dynamic situations. If I didn't know about physiology and energy systems, I might not understand. And what's the difference between third down scrimmage and goal line scrimmage? And so that has been the biggest thing for me, is it gave me a neutral lens to evaluate what people were saying from a physical side. Obviously, the tactical side, the psychological side, you have to take those into account as well. But that's been really helpful for me in, the old Bruce Lee quote, like accepting what is useful and rejecting what's not. You have to have a lens to do that. That's where S&C has helped tremendously.
Mm-hmm. And I could kind of see that, reading some of the stuff that you've put out and listening to you on podcasts. I was always kind of like, you know what, the reason why he's thinking about this is because he has that S&C background. Like he's thinking progression, periodization, and closed and open and all this stuff. And I'm like, again, I'm biased, but I'm like, most coaches aren't thinking about this stuff because they don't think like S&C people. And this could be a huge benefit for most coaches to learn some base level of like that kind of stuff so that they can take that to their sport. So I was just curious. I wanted to go straight to the source and ask how you thought, in your opinion, that level of knowledge has influenced your coaching in the sport world. So thank you for sharing your answer there. All right. I lied too. I said that was the last question. The last one I have for you here is who's someone that I should try and have on this podcast, someone that I should try and connect with? Obviously, this has been a great opportunity for anyone that's listening to learn more about what you're doing. It's a great opportunity for me to learn more. I've got 2 and a bit pages worth of notes just from this talk alone. Who are some people that I can connect with, try and hear from, learn from, and share the messages that they have with other people?
Oh man, so I could go on and on.
I'm not going to complain if you do.
Looking at strength and conditioning, and specifically in the football and in the combative work. So I was lucky. Got to be good friends with Keir Wenham Flat, as I mentioned earlier. My claim to fame is that I think I may be one of the first Americans to like get turned on to his work, because I had the rugby background. So when he was still working in rugby, I had learned about his stuff. But he introduced me. So he's obviously phenomenal. He's been on a ton of podcasts. Go listen to him everywhere you can.
I think I've listened to probably almost every podcast he's done.
Yeah, he's great. He introduced me to 3 guys that were in his conference for American football here in the States. So Mike Tucker at Villanova, he's with their football program. Justin Lima at Towson, and Nick DeMarco at Elon. Are guys I've met through Keir. I think they're doing an amazing job at kind of some of the things we talked about, but incorporating everything from, speed days and power days and conditioning days. I'm definitely biased. I know they do some crawling and grappling and tumbling. And so I think those guys are awesome for that. So at that kind of collegiate S&C level, I think they're awesome. When it comes to kind of some of the youth development stuff, Jeremy Frisch, who is a former collegiate strength coach who now does youth development stuff out in Massachusetts, is just an absolute gold mine of information. He's a youth, I think, baseball coach. I know he's a youth football coach, but he also runs like some youth training programs, but they're not, the age-old watered-down version of a high-level program. They're truly aimed at kids, at fun, at building a lifelong love of fitness and building a lifelong love of training, because I think that's what gets missed a lot. If you're going to make it at the higher level, you can't just love your sport. You kind of have to love the training, because when it's 6 a.m. and the coaches are yelling at you to get out of bed and do the hard stuff, like if you don't enjoy it. So he makes it awesome with really fun game-based training, but he's putting in high quality change of direction, sprint, grapple work in these really cool games. So if you're into the youth side, that's my go-to.
That's awesome. And I haven't heard of Coach Frisch there, and I'll definitely look into him. But the 4 names on the collegiate side that you mentioned, those are guys that I've learned a ton from. Some of the go-to names for me. I actually, at the beginning of the COVID whole lockdown thing, I actually did the virtual internship at Elon with Nick and his staff there. And like you said, those are 4 guys that I've been following a long time. So I'll try and reach out and see if they're interested. I know we'll see if anything comes of it, but definitely some really bright dudes that are thinking in line with the way that we're talking about stuff today. So is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap it up here, Coach?
No, I mean, being shameless, like most of my writings are at usafootball.com. We have a blog there. So my stuff is just floating around there. If any of the stuff we talked about is interesting, the prep for contact, the skills progression, I'm always happy to chat. I'm fairly active on social media, so you can reach me there. I will get back to everybody. I can't promise the time frame. Sometimes work and real life gets in the way. But I, always happy to take questions and chat about this stuff. But there is some information floating out on there that kind of puts it in general concepts and ideas you can read up on, and those are all available, like I said, at usafootball.com, just on our website. That's since I work for them, I get to publish through them, and it's a nice way to get it out there.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that in the show notes I link all of that information so that people can can find some of your articles on USA Football, some of the other ones that you've written, some other places, ones that I've checked out, and then I'll link all your contact info in there as well. So yeah, man, honestly, other than that, like that was just a gold mine of information there. Like I myself am definitely going to go back and listen to this one again. Like I've got 2.5, 3 pages worth of notes. That was amazing. I'm so appreciative for your time, Coach. Thank you for joining us today. And you guys go and check Andy out. His writing is awesome, and it's a refreshing stance on how we go about things in the football world, in my opinion.
Well, hugely appreciative of the opportunity. I'll say youth development is youth development and football is football. So to have some conversations and chat with some new coaches, maybe, and maybe even a different game type, but we're all from the same father. So it's awesome stuff. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure was all mine.